I'm too big for you.
Try me anyway.
I'm too big for you, the giant mail-order bride warns. But he saddled the bride and say, try me anyway. I'm too big for you, Magnolia Brennan warned. Her voice trembling as she stood in her flowing cream wedding dress in the golden lamplight of Jasper Thorne's Montana ranch house. The giant mail-order bride's 6'6" frame, towering over the rancher, who sat looking up at her with his wide-brimmed hat still on his head and his vest unbuttoned from the long wedding day. But when she took a step backward toward the bedroom door, her hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly where the dress draped soft and loose, ready to grab her packed bag and run like she'd done with two other men, who'd taken one look at her imposing size and sent her back. Jasper Thorne, the 32-year-old cavalry veteran, with kind eyes and calloused hands, reached out from where he sat and gently pulled her closer, positioning the giant bride to stand between his knees as he looked up at her with a smile that held no fear, only wonder. His hands settled on her hips with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. And when she tried to pull away, tried to warn him again that she was too much woman for any man to handle, he saddled the bride, drawing her down onto his lap as he sat on that wooden chair, cradling all 210 pounds of her like she weighed nothing more than morning mist. "Try me anyway," Jasper said, his rough voice soft as prayer, one hand moving to rest protectively on her belly while the other cupped her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch. And Magnolia, the giant mail-order bride, who'd accidentally broken a man's ribs during her one attempt at intimacy, who'd been rejected 7 times for being too tall and too strong and too much, who'd learned to make herself small in every way except the one that mattered, froze in his embrace, her hand covering his on her stomach, caught between the terror of hoping and the desperate need to believe that maybe this rancher in his dusty vest and worn hat, bathed in the warm golden light of their wedding evening, might actually mean what he said. But why would a woman strong enough to birth calves and carry feed sacks be trembling in a man's arms? What had convinced this giant bride that being too big meant being unwanted? And why was Jasper Thorne, this weathered rancher, looking up at her in the honeyed sunset light streaming through the windows, touching her with such reverence and certainty, like maybe he'd been praying his whole life for a woman too big for everyone else, but exactly right for him? The room smelled of pine and leather and the sage that grew wild outside the windows. Magnolia could feel Jasper's heart beating steady and strong beneath her palm, where it rested on his chest, could feel the warmth of his hand on her face, the solid strength of his thighs beneath her weight. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect him from what she knew she was capable of, to save them both the heartbreak of trying and failing like she'd failed before. But his eyes held her frozen, those deep brown eyes that looked at her not with the fear she'd grown accustomed to, but with something that looked dangerously like desire mixed with respect. "You don't understand," Magnolia whispered, and her voice cracked on the words. "I've hurt people, Jasper. Not on purpose, but I'm strong, stronger than I look, stronger than I mean to be. The last man who wanted." She couldn't finish, couldn't force out the words that still haunted her 3 years later. Jasper's thumb stroked her cheekbone, gentle as a whisper. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me what happened that's got you convinced you're dangerous." The sunset light painted everything gold and amber, and outside, Magnolia could hear the cattle settling for the evening, the distant call of a hawk, the wind moving through the grass like a living thing. She closed her eyes, not wanting to see his face change when she told him the truth. His name was Thomas Wickham, a merchant in Colorado. He courted me for 2 weeks, said my size didn't matter, said he wanted a strong wife who could help with the business. Her throat tightened. On our wedding night he was rough, tried to push me down, tried to position me the way he wanted, without asking, without checking if I was comfortable. And I panicked. The memory made her stomach twist. I pushed him away, just pushed him, not even meaning to hurt him, just needing space to breathe. But he flew backward into the dresser, Broke 2 ribs and his collarbone. Jasper was silent for a long moment, his hand never stopping its gentle stroking of her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful, not judgmental. He tried to force you, tried to manhandle you without consent, without care for what you needed. And when you defended yourself, because that's what it was, Magnolia, self-defense, you got blamed for being strong instead of him getting blamed for being careless. He shifted slightly, adjusting her weight on his lap, and Magnolia realized with shock that he wasn't struggling at all, wasn't straining or shaking or showing any sign that holding her was difficult. That's not you being too big for a man. That's him being too small in character to deserve you. Magnolia's eyes flew open. But I hurt him, she insisted, needing Jasper to understand the danger he was in. His family had me arrested, called me violent, dangerous. The marshal only let me go because Thomas finally admitted he'd been too rough. But the whole town, everyone looked at me like I was some kind of monster. Tears started to slip down her cheeks. And then it happened again. Different town, different man. He tried to lift me and couldn't, threw his back out and blamed me for being too heavy. Said I'd deceived him about my size even though he'd seen me before we married. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm cursed, Jasper. Cursed to want things I can never have. Cursed to hurt anyone who tries to love me. Jasper's response was to stand, lifting Magnolia with him as he rose, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist to keep from falling. He took 3 steps and lowered her gently onto the edge of the bed, but instead of joining her there, he knelt before her, bringing their faces level. His hat fell to the floor. His hands came to rest on her knees, warm and steady. You're not cursed, he said, and his voice carried the certainty of someone who'd faced down death and lived to tell about it. You've just been with the wrong men. Men who wanted a woman small enough to control, easy enough to manage, quiet enough to ignore. Men who saw your strength and felt threatened by it instead of grateful for it. Magnolia stared at Jasper, kneeling before her in the golden light, his vest dusty from the long day, his hands gentle on her knees, and felt something crack open in her chest. How can you say that? She whispered. You just met me this morning. You don't know what I'm like when I'm scared, when I panic, when my strength gets away from me. Her hands twisted in the fabric of her dress. What if I hurt you, Jasper? What if we're lying together and something happens and I push you or grip you too hard and... Her voice broke completely. I couldn't live with myself if I broke you. I'd rather leave now, spare us both the pain, than watch you look at me the way Thomas looked at me after. Like I was something to be afraid of. Jasper's hands moved from her knees to her hands, stilling their anxious twisting. His palms were rough with calluses, warm and solid and real. Magnolia, look at me. When she didn't, when she kept her eyes fixed on their joined hands, he said it again, firmer. Look at me. She finally raised her eyes to his, expecting to see doubt or second thoughts. Instead, she saw determination. I spent 8 years in the cavalry, Jasper said quietly. 4 of those years fighting Apache warriors who could track a whisper and disappear into rock. I've carried wounded soldiers twice your size through canyon country in 100-degree heat. I've broken wild horses that wanted nothing more than to crush my skull against the nearest fence post. I've been shot, stabbed, thrown, trampled, and left for dead in the New Mexico desert. He paused, letting the words sink in. And I'm still here, still strong, still capable of handling whatever comes my way. He stood then, pulling her to her feet with him, and before Magnolia could protest, he wrapped his arms around her waist and lifted. Not struggled to lift. Not strained or grunted or showed any difficulty, just lifted her clean off the ground like she was made of feathers and air. Magnolia gasped, her hands flying to his shoulders, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Feel that? Jasper asked, holding her there, suspended, his face tilted up to hers, that small smile playing at his lips. All 210 pounds of you, and I'm not shaking, not struggling, not afraid. He lowered her slowly, letting her body slide against his until her feet touched the floor again, but he didn't let go. So when I say try me anyway, I'm not being foolish or naive. I'm telling you the God's honest truth. You are not too big for me. The The room felt smaller suddenly, warmer, charged with something Magnolia couldn't name, but felt all the way to her bones. "But why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would you want me when you could have any woman in Montana? Someone smaller, prettier, easier to—" Jasper's laugh cut her off, rough and genuine. "Easier, Magnolia. I don't want easy. I had easy. Before the war, I was engaged to a girl named Catherine Mercer. 5 feet tall, delicate as china, sweet as honey. Everyone said we were perfect together." His smile turned bitter. "Then I went to war, saw things, did things, came back with nightmares that wouldn't quit and a temper I couldn't always control. And Catherine took one look at the man I'd become and broke our engagement. Said I wasn't the boy she'd fallen in love with. Said I scared her." He pulled back slightly, giving Magnolia space, but keeping his hands on her waist. "Every woman in town after that looked at me the same way, like I was broken, like I needed fixing or avoiding. They wanted the charming boy who'd ridden off to war, not the man who came back with blood on his hands and ghosts in his head." His eyes met hers, and Magnolia saw pain there, old and deep and familiar. "So I stopped trying, worked my ranch, kept to myself, figured I'd die alone because that was safer than risking someone getting close enough to see how damaged I really was." His voice dropped. "Then the mail order agency sent your photograph. Sent a letter saying you'd been returned twice, that you were too tall, too strong, too much woman for the men who'd requested you. And I knew." "Knew what?" Magnolia asked, hardly daring to breathe. Jasper's hands tightened on her waist. "That you and I were the same. Too much for most people. Too complicated, too intense, too real. And if I was going to risk opening my heart again, it was going to be for someone who understood what it felt like to be too much. Someone who wouldn't break the first time I woke up screaming from a nightmare. Someone strong enough to handle me at my worst and still see me at my best." He reached up and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. "I didn't order a mail-order bride looking for convenient or comfortable, Magnolia. I was looking for real. And you, standing here warning me away because you're afraid of hurting me, you're the most real thing I've encountered since I came home from that war." A knock at the door shattered the moment. Both of them jumped, Jasper's hands dropping from Magnolia's waist as he turned toward the sound. "Mr. Thorne?" a woman's voice called. "It's Adelaide Pritchard from the land office. I need to speak with you about the bride registry papers." Magnolia's stomach dropped. Adelaide Pritchard, the same woman who'd processed her paperwork when she'd arrived on the morning stage. The same woman who'd looked her up and down with thinly veiled disgust and said loud enough for half the platform to hear, "Lord have mercy, I hope Mr. Thorne knows what he's getting into." Jasper's jaw tightened. He looked at Magnolia, then at the door, then back at Magnolia. "Stay here," he said quietly. "I'll handle this." But Magnolia shook her head. She'd spent 7 years running, 7 years hiding, 7 years letting other people define who she was and what she was worth. "No," she said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I'm your wife now. Whatever she has to say, she can say it to both of us." She straightened to her full height, squared her shoulders, and walked to the door with Jasper beside her. When she opened it, Adelaide Pritchard stood there with a folder in her hands and a pinched expression on her face. The older woman's eyes widened when she saw Magnolia, traveled up and down her frame in that assessing way Magnolia had learned to hate, and then settled on Jasper with something like pity. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize for the intrusion, but there's been an irregularity with the bride registry." Adelaide's voice was clipped, official, deliberately not looking at Magnolia. 2 previous marriage contracts were dissolved due to complications. The territorial office requires verification that this marriage is legitimate and consummated within 30 days, or it too will be subject to annulment proceedings. Now her eyes did cut to Magnolia, cold and judgmental. "Given the bride's history of failed placements, we have to be certain this isn't another case of misrepresentation or incompatibility." Magnolia felt her face flush hot with shame and anger. Misrepresentation. Like she'd lied about being 6'6", like her size was some kind of deception. But before she could speak, before she could defend herself or tell Adelaide Pritchard exactly what she thought of her irregularities, Jasper stepped forward. He moved in front of Magnolia, not blocking her but standing with her, his presence solid and unwavering. "Mrs. Pritchard," he said, and his voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from commanding men in battle. "My wife and I appreciate your diligence in following territorial regulations. However, I can assure you that our marriage is entirely legitimate, enthusiastically consensual, and will be consummated on our schedule, not yours." Adelaide's face went red. "Mr. Thorne, I'm simply doing my job. The territory has laws about marriage contracts, and given this woman's history—" "This woman," Jasper interrupted, his voice going hard as iron, "is Mrs. Magnolia Thorne. My wife, and her history is none of your concern. What happens in our home, in our bedroom, in our marriage, is between us and God, not you and the territorial office." He took the folder from Adelaide's hands and opened it, scanning the documents quickly. "If you need verification of consummation in 30 days, fine. We'll provide it. Until then, I'd appreciate it if you'd respect our privacy on our wedding night." He handed the folder back and started to close the door, but Adelaide's hand shot out. "Mr. Thorne, I feel obligated to warn you. The previous husbands cited physical incompatibility and even injury. One man required a doctor. You seem like a reasonable man, and I'd hate to see you—" "Mrs. Pritchard," Magnolia said, her voice cutting through the evening air like a blade, "I appreciate your concern for my husband's well-being. But Jasper is a grown man who survived things that would break most people. He doesn't need your protection from me." She stepped forward, drawing herself up to her full, imposing height, and had the satisfaction of watching Adelaide take an involuntary step back. "And I'm done being treated like I'm dangerous or defective, because I'm bigger and stronger than most women. My previous marriages failed because those men wanted a woman they could control, not a partner they could respect. Jasper isn't those men. So unless you have official business that can't wait until morning, I suggest you leave us to our wedding night." Adelaide Pritchard's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. For a long moment she just stood there, clutching her folder to her chest, staring up at Magnolia with a mixture of shock and something that might have been grudging respect. Finally she cleared her throat, straightened her spine, and gave a curt nod. "Very well. I'll return in 30 days for the required documentation." Her eyes softened just slightly as they moved between Magnolia and Jasper. "For what it's worth, Mr. Thorne, you're the first man who's defended her instead of defending yourself from her. Maybe that'll make all the difference." She turned and walked down the porch steps into the gathering dusk, her footsteps fading into the evening sounds of cattle and wind and distant birdsong. Jasper closed the door and turned to find Magnolia leaning against the wall, her hands shaking, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Hey," he said softly, crossing to her. "You were magnificent. Did you see her face when you told her I wasn't those other men?" But Magnolia shook her head, the tears spilling over now. 30 days, she whispered. 30 days to prove this marriage is real, or they'll annul it. 30 days for me to hurt you or disappoint you, or prove that everyone who said I was too much was right." She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her cream dress pooling around her, and dropped her face into her hands. "I can't do this, Jasper. I can't spend a month waiting for the moment you realize you made a mistake. Can't watch you start to flinch when I move too fast or reach for you. Can't." Her voice broke completely. Jasper didn't hesitate. He sat down beside her on the floor, right there in his vest and dusty boots, and pulled her against his chest. Magnolia tried to resist, tried to keep herself separate and protected, but his arms were strong and sure, and they wrapped around her, like he had no intention of ever letting go. "Listen to me," Jasper said into her hair, his voice rumbling through his chest where her ear pressed against it. "I didn't marry you because I thought it would be easy. I married you because when I saw your photograph, when I read that you'd been rejected for being too strong, something in me recognized something in you. We're both carrying wounds, Magnolia, both convinced we're too damaged or too different for anyone to want us as we are. But maybe he pulled back enough to tilt her face up to his. And maybe two people who are too much for everyone else are exactly enough for each other. Magnolia searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that he was just saying what she wanted to hear. But all she saw was honesty. Raw, vulnerable, terrifying honesty. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words coming out small and broken. "I'm scared of wanting this, of wanting you, of hoping that maybe this time will be different. Because if it's not, if I hurt you or you decide I'm too much to handle, I don't think I'll survive it. Not again." Jasper's thumb brushed away her tears. "Then let's make a deal," he said. "Let's stop trying to predict the future and just focus on right now. Right now, in this moment, we're two people sitting on the floor of a ranch house in Montana, holding each other. That's all. No pressure, no performance, no proving anything to Adelaide Pritchard or the territorial office or anyone else." His smile was gentle. "Can you do that? Can you just be here with me right now and let tomorrow worry about itself?" Magnolia took a shaky breath, then another. The room smelled like pine and leather and the faint scent of sage from outside. She could feel Jasper's heartbeat, steady and strong, could feel his arms solid around her, could feel the rough texture of his vest under her palm. "Right now, just right now." "Okay," she whispered. "Just right now." Jasper stood, pulling her up with him, and this time when he lifted her, one arm under her knees, one behind her back, Magnolia didn't protest, didn't warn him, didn't do anything except wrap her arms around his neck and let him carry her the few steps to the bed. He laid her down gently, like she was something precious, and stretched out beside her, propping himself on one elbow to look at her in the dying light. "Tell me something true," Jasper said softly. "Something nobody else knows about you." Magnolia thought for a moment, her hand finding his where it rested on the quilt between them. "When I was a little girl," she said slowly, "before I got so tall that everything changed, I used to dance. My mama taught me. We'd dance in the kitchen while we cooked, dance in the barn while we did chores, dance in the parlor when Papa played his fiddle." Her voice went distant with memory. "I loved it. Loved the way my body felt when it moved, strong and graceful and free. But then I grew and grew and grew, and suddenly I was too big to dance with anyone, too tall for partners, too heavy for lifts, too much space taken up on any dance floor." She met his eyes. "I haven't danced in 14 years. Haven't let myself even think about it because it hurt too much to remember what it felt like to move without apologizing for taking up space." Jasper was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Then he stood, walked to the corner where an old gramophone sat gathering dust, and wound it up. Scratchy music filled the room, a waltz slow and sweet and achingly beautiful. He turned back to Magnolia, his hand extended, his eyes asking a question his mouth didn't need to voice. "Jasper, we can't, I'll step on your feet, I'll throw off the rhythm, I'm too big for me." Jasper finished, that small smile playing at his lips. "I thought we'd established that wasn't true." He waggled his fingers. "Come on, Mrs. Thorne, dance with your husband." Magnolia's heart hammered as she stood, as she took his hand, as he pulled her close in the traditional waltz position, his hand on her waist, hers on his shoulder, their other hands clasped between them. Except everything was wrong. She towered over him. Her hand on his shoulder felt awkward and too high. His hand on her waist seemed lost against her frame. But then Jasper started to move, guiding her into the steps, and something magical happened. He didn't try to lead from a position of height, didn't try to make her bend or shrink or accommodate his size. He just danced with her, reading her movements, anticipating her weight shifts, moving with a confidence that came from understanding bodies in motion. And Magnolia, for the first time in 14 years, danced. Tears streamed down her face as they moved across the bedroom floor in the golden lamplight, the scratchy gramophone playing its sweet old waltz. And Jasper holding her not like she was too big, but like she was exactly the right size for his arms. "How are you doing this?" Magnolia asked, her voice choked with emotion. "How are you making this work when no one else could?" Jasper spun her gently, bringing her back against his chest, and his voice was warm in her ear. "Because I'm not trying to make you fit into what I think a woman should be. I'm just dancing with who you are. Your height, your strength, your size, they're not problems to solve, Magnolia. They're just facts. Like the fact that I'm shorter than you, or that my back has scars from Apache arrows, or that I wake up some nights screaming from memories I can't outrun." He turned her to face him again. "We're all just facts, darling. The question isn't whether we fit some perfect ideal. The question is whether we're brave enough to dance anyway." The song ended. Another began. They kept dancing. And somewhere between the second song and the third, Magnolia stopped crying, stopped apologizing, stopped holding back her strength for fear of overwhelming him. She let herself move fully, freely, the way her body wanted to move, and Jasper matched her step for step. When they finally stopped, both breathing hard, both smiling, the night had fully fallen outside, and the room was lit only by lamplight and the embers of the fire. "Thank you," Magnolia whispered, and the words carried the weight of 14 years of grief and longing, finally finding release. "Thank you for giving me back something I thought was lost forever." Jasper cupped her face in both hands, his calloused palms rough against her tear-stained cheeks. "That's what we're going to do for each other," he said. "Give back the things the world tried to take. Your dancing, my hope, your belief that you're not too much, my belief that I'm not too broken." He leaned up, she leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss that tasted like salt and promise and the terrifying beauty of second chances. It wasn't practiced or perfect. Their height difference meant Magnolia had to bend awkwardly, and Jasper had to stretch, and their noses bumped more than once. But it was real. And real, they were both learning, was infinitely better than perfect. When they broke apart, Magnolia rested her forehead against Jasper's, both of them still catching their breath. "I want to try," she said softly. "Want to try being with you, really being with you, not holding back or protecting you from myself. But I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Jasper said without hesitation. Magnolia's hands moved to his vest, fingers working the buttons slowly. "Promise me you'll tell me if I hurt you. Promise me you'll stop me if something's wrong. Promise me you won't try to be brave or tough or prove something if you need me to be gentler or slower or different." Her voice shook. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I hurt you, Jasper. Even accidentally, even not meaning to. I need to know you'll protect yourself even if it means stopping me." Jasper's hands covered hers on his vest, stilling them. "I promise," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to tell you if anything hurts or feels wrong. I promise not to tough it out or pretend I'm fine when I'm not." He guided her hands to continue unbuttoning, holding her gaze. "But you have to promise me the same thing. Promise you won't hold back so much that you're not really here with me. Promise you'll let yourself feel what you feel, want what you want, be as strong as you are." Magnolia nodded, her throat too tight for words. They undressed each other slowly in the lamplight, not with the desperate passion of people trying to prove something, but with the tender curiosity of two people learning who they'd married. Every scar was noted, every mark explained. Jasper's back carried the white lines of Apache arrows. Magnolia's hands bore the calluses of farm work, his nightmares, her rejections, his broken pieces, her sharp edges. They laid it all bare, and neither of them looked away. When they finally came together, it was awkward at first. Magnolia tensed, waiting for the moment he'd struggle or strain or show signs of being overwhelmed. But Jasper moved with the same confidence he'd shown dancing, reading her body, adjusting his approach, asking wordless questions with his hands and answering hers with patient guidance. When she gripped his shoulders too hard, afraid, he didn't flinch, just covered her hands with his and whispered, "I've got you. You're not going to break me." And slowly, carefully, Magnolia began to believe him. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Magnolia's head on Jasper's chest, his arms wrapped around her, both of them breathing hard and smiling in the darkness. "Well," Jasper said, his voice rough with emotion and something that sounded like joy, "I think we can safely tell Adelaide Pritchard the marriage has been consummated." Magnolia laughed, really laughed. for the first time in years. I think we can. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Thank you for not giving up on me. For seeing past the size to the person underneath. Jasper's arms tightened around her. Thank you for being brave enough to try me anyway. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever felt too much for the world. Drop your thoughts below and let's build a community that believes being too much for the wrong person means being exactly right for the right one. Subscribe now. See you in the next story.